talking to me? Or are you just practicing for one of those performances of yours? Hot language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus. You said I had to write that letter to your mother, and I had to tell the judge that it was you. And I had to sell the car and go to Florida because that's just my way of saying
that I love you.
Had to call you at the crack of dawn and list the times that I've been wrong. That's just my way of saying that I'm sorry.
It's a job.
Sorry.
Language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus.
Is exactly like where you are. Paradise is exactly like where you are right now. Only much better. I saw this guy in the train, and he seemed to have gotten stuck in one of those abstract trances, and he was going. And Fred said, I think he's in some kind of pain. I think it's a pain cry. And I said, pain cry? Then language is a virus.
Language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus.
Well, I was talking to a friend, and I was saying I wanted you, and I was looking for you, but I couldn't find you. I couldn't find you. And he said, hey, you talking to me? Or are you just practicing for one of those performances of yours?
Hot language, it's a virus. It's a virus.
You said I had to write that letter to your mother, and I had to tell the judge that it was you. And I had to sell the car and go to Florida because that's just my way of saying
that I love you.
Had to call you at the crack of dawn and list the times that I've been wrong. That's just my way of saying that I'm sorry.
It's a job.
Sorry.
Language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus.
Paradise is exactly like where you are. Paradise is exactly like where you are right now. Only much better. I saw this guy in the train, and he seemed to have gotten stuck in one of those abstract trances, and he was going. And Fred said, I think he's in some kind of pain. I think it's a pain cry. And I said, pain cry? Then language is a virus.
Language, it's a virus. Language, it's a virus.
Well, I was talking to a friend, and I was saying I wanted you, and I was looking for you, but I couldn't find you. I couldn't find you. And he said, hey, you
Non, quand je vous ai dit que j'étais amoureux de vous.
Amoureux? Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Ça.
Non. Ça, je sais ce que c'est. C'est la volupté.
Non. La volupté est une conséquence. Elle n'existe pas sans l'amour.
Alors l'amour, c'est quoi?
Votre marque de voiture.
ツインカムのポテンシャルとターボの瞬発力が合体した1800で160馬力。クライマックスここに極まるニューコロナ GT。
Coronavirus, coronavirus, lávense las manos, háganlo seguido. Coronavirus, coronavirus, pónganse las pilas en lugares concurridos. Coronavirus, coronavirus, no se toquen la cara, evítenlo amigos. Coronavirus, coronavirus, usen desinfectante, ese es muy efectivo. Y este es el rey de las cumbias virales.
Ta voix, tes yeux, tes mains, tes lèvres. Nos silences, nos paroles. La lumière qui s'en va, la lumière qui revient. Un seul sourire pour nous deux. Par besoin de savoir, j'ai vu la nuit créer le jour, sans que nous changeons d'apparence. Ô bien-aimé de tous et bien-aimé d'un seul, en silence ta bouche a promis d'être heureuse. De loin en loin dit la haine, de proche en proche.
Welcome back to another virus Mythologies. I hope I'm not muted. Yes, welcome back, although I'm actually here in this screen for you. I'm staying here and reappearing here every Friday. Thanks for everyone who is watching us and who watched us already before and also continues to do so. As I announced in the previous first episode, we will use this space and this time to go into the contemporary mythologies, the contemporary virus mythologies, and deconstruct, in a way, deconstruct from the point of view of semiotics and critique of ideology, the current mythologies. One of these current mythologies is definitely social distancing, a term which is rather new, but as we will see tonight, it has various meanings and it acquires various different forms. If there is a movie which points in the direction into which our current society and current sociability might lead, then this movie is definitely, and there are many more movies, but the one you showed just at the beginning, it is Alphaville. Alphaville by Jean-Luc Godard from 1965, which is a movie where a supercomputer called Alpha 60 basically governs the society, and it governs the society through mathematical equations. So basically mathematics, rationality is that which creates social bonds, which prohibits, in the case of this movie, many things are prohibited. So for instance, love and emotions, it's prohibited. What is also prohibited, or what actually disappears from the dictionaries, is the question why. It is also the phrase "I'm in love with you," which on this planet, in this society, doesn't exist anymore. It is actually prohibited. What is interesting is that although you have a sort of distance and you have an alienated society, there is still social touch. There is still a sort of physicality. While there is no sociability, to put it like that. So for instance, in Alphaville, in this dystopian movie, touch is permitted, even sex is permitted. Sex is allowed, and everyone can do it, but what happens is that it becomes commodified. It becomes a kind of product, it is alienated. And even if you can have a physical touch, what you don't have is the emotional, the social bond between people, because everything is governed by a supercomputer, which in today's times might be a sort of artificial intelligence. The situation today in which we are is similar to that, except that we have physical distance, which should be the correct term for social distancing, but at the same time, what we are living now through these times is a reinvention of sociability. Because what you can see, the very term social distance, although it is wrong and contradictory, points into a direction which will affect different aspects of life. The psychology, the mental health, depression, paranoia, is someone too close, is someone too far away? And in a way, actually, although it's a kind of perverted new term, social distancing could lead us back to a German sociologist called Georg Simmel, who at the beginning of the century was writing about the metropolis and the mental state. And in one of his articles, essays called The Stranger, he anticipates actually what social distancing might mean, because he defines social distance in the sense of a stranger who arrives to a community as a very complex interplay between nearness and distance at the same time, because the stranger is not too distant, but the stranger also cannot become too near, because if he's too near, then the stranger belongs to your family circle, friend circle, and so on. So it's always this kind of interplay, which you also can see today. You go to the supermarket. For instance, 2 days ago, I went to the pharmacy, and now here where I am at the moment in Vienna, you already have these special rules. It is only one person per pharmacy who can get in. Once you enter, you have to wash your hands disinfect with alcohol. If you don't have a mask, you cannot enter, but you can buy it, of course. And then what is interesting to see is precisely the sociability, how sociability is being reinvented. To put it very simple, only a few months ago, you would your mouth would be shown. So if you speak to the shop assistant or you are the shop assistant, you can have a smile. You can react by facial expression, which today is limited to the eyes. So basically, people are starting to smile with the eyes, especially in those places where face masks have become obligatory in public spaces. So what you can see is that the very term social distancing leads us again back not only to semiotics, in which way the masks can also be interpreted in a semiotic way. For instance, you can, before the coronavirus spread all across Europe and the world, if you would see someone with a face mask on the streets, at least here in Europe, I'm not mentioning Hong Kong or countries which already had the SARS, outbreak. But if you would see people with face masks, you would first think they are either a surgeon or a bank robber. While today, you know, you can even go to a bank or to a post with a face mask. So many things are changing, and it brings us back to a philosopher who anticipated it with something what he called the hedgehog dilemma. This is, of course, Arthur Schopenhauer, who imagined a situation of hedgehogs who are outside, and it's cold weather, and in order to become, you know, to share warm and to come closer, they have to approach each other. But the problem is, even if it's cold outside and they are warm, the closer they come, their spines and the needles actually bring them more far away. And that was Schopenhauer's metaphor for human intimacy, which is a very complicated and complex subject. No wonder that it was Freud who, in one of his books from 1921, actually used this example of the hedgehog, saying that there is some, let's call it like that, primal hostility in relations between two or more people, whether it's marriage, friendship, or a family relation, which can, according to Freud, only be civilized through love. And that's what Freud claims, you know, that only by love you can go beyond the hedgehog dilemma, beyond the metaphor Schopenhauer used. Since we have a surprise guest tonight, we have to move on to the other examples we will use before the guest joins us. The surprise guest will join in some half an hour. So first we will do our Friday semiotic homework, and then we will join by someone who understands social distance and the future and many humorous aspects of social distancing very well. So let us see how our future society might look like, and this future society is already here. So how does it look when social distance comes to Kuwait?
Hold on a second, didn't we agree that you shouldn't leave home except when it's necessary? We know you love to keep in touch with others, but you're not helping the efforts to stop the spread of infection. To start with, try to greet everyone from a safe distance. When it comes to closed spaces like elevators, make sure you keep enough space between you and the people around you. As for when you are standing in any queue, keep a safe distance between you and the nearest person to you. And when you want to pay, use a card instead of cash. Finally, please avoid attending or organizing any private or public social events. The spread of infection happens very quickly. Frequent mixing with others makes it difficult to identify and link all connected people to any infected person. Let it stop with you. Your compliance with the health authorities' instructions limits this from happening and keeps everyone safe. We ask God to keep us all safe. With greetings from the Ministry of Health, Health Media Office.
So let's do a short semiotic analysis of the advertisement by the Health Ministry of Kuwait, which we just showed. So what can you see in this ad? What can you see? You can see a world that is changing, but you can at the same time, as an old quote says by Lampedusa, you can also see that everything has to change so that everything can stay the same. Namely, what you could have seen in this video are mainly men, not mainly, actually only men. You can only see men in the video. There is no single woman. You can see cars. Cars are obviously important, and they have something to do with social distance, which we will explore very soon. And you can see that cash is turning into cards. I mean, that's not something new. As you know, in Sweden is basically an 80% cashless society or something like that. The majority of people use cards, and also the advices of the scientists and the doctors today and our governments is to use cards much more. But what you could also see in this ad by the Kuwait Ministry of Health is how state institutions are now having an educational, I mean, they always had as a kind of ideological apparatus, an educational, re-educational role. So they're actually already imagining and shaping the society to come. What is worrying here is, of course, not the society to come, but the society to stay. You know, because what you can, and that's another mythology, I would say, that everyone convinces us we are going, there is no return to the normal, we are going to invent a new normal. And of course, it will be a new normal, but what you could have seen in this ad is that most of the bad things will stay the same. You know, a society which is patriarchal, a society full of cars and cards, which basically means more surveillance. And if it's on the one hand states who are now imagining and also imposing a sort of sociability, the others are, of course, big companies. So let's see how a big car company is imagining the world during coronavirus. Volkswagen, you know the meaning of the word Volkswagen. Of course, it means the people's car, and what you can see here is the people's car is realizing that what we are facing is a long period ahead, in which even the car industry has to adopt. According to an article which was published, I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, difficult to keep trace of time anymore in times of self-isolation. But in an article published, I think, on Tuesday in Science, a group of scientists, researchers from Harvard claimed that certain social distance measures will stay until 2022, which means the next 2 years. So if that's true, there is no wonder that even the car industry now has to adopt to social distance, because if you have seen anything, at least in Europe, but also other cities, is that cities became empty of cars. We can finally have some fresh air, see the sky. You know, from Berlin you can even see the Alps now. And in many other cities you can see mountains which you never saw. But what you can also see is that the usage of cars was rapidly reduced. So there is no wonder that the car industry now wants to, to find a smart solution in which way to use the current crisis. And I think what they are actually doing now is realizing that the car, in the same way it was a Volkswagen, a Volks car, a people's car, today can become an instrument of social distance. So for instance, if you're happy enough to have enough money and a car, instead of using public transport where the risk to catch coronavirus is higher, you will use a car. So even if we lived in this short time frame where cars disappeared from the streets of cities, and it wasn't so bad, what we might be approaching very soon is a sort of reinvention of the car. What is interesting with Volkswagen, of course, a short digression, is that its history was shaped on the one hand by Porsche, Ferdinand Porsche, and on the other hand by Adolf Hitler. So, which brings us into the future as well, not to Hitler, but to the role of the state in the car industry. how Porsche and how Hitler. Porsche was the first one, Ferdinand Porsche in 1933, who invented the Beetle design, and he called it first Volksauto. And then in 1934, Hitler came in and he realized that this is a great idea to, have a people's car. And he basically used the Porsche design. The German state-founded, state-owned company, which was later called Volkswagen, with the idea that the Volkswagen, the car, should be, its price should be very cheap. It could be bought by every citizen of the Third Reich for 990 Reichsmark, which is around between 3,700 to 4,000 euro today. So it's rather cheap, you could say. Well, that's how the Volkswagen was created. We could also speak about slave labor and so on. But what is interesting in this story is how at the beginning the car, although there was also an electric car much more before, but because of the industry lobby, it didn't happen. But you can see how important state funding of something like that is. Of course, it depends on the state, what kind of state it is and why is the state doing it. What we can see today with the coronavirus, and this is a sort of apocalypse in the sense of a sort of unveiling of a reality which already existed, is that cities and the urban spaces, I mean, back from the time Georg Simmel was writing about it, or other sociologists, Dirken, or even Walter Benjamin in the Arcades project, you could have seen this transformation of the city into something which is adopted to the car. So it's not anymore the people's car, in the sense that it was perceived before that the people will own the car, but it is the car today which owns the people, so to say. This is the best way to see that and prove that this is true. We can see it in a short clip which comes from Toronto from a few days ago, of someone who tries to show us what social distancing actually means in a city full of cars.
Stop. Hammer time. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. My music hits me so hard, makes me say, oh my Lord, thank you for blessing me. When I mind you rhyme and do hype, it feels good when you know you're down. A super dope homeboy from the Oak Town, and I'm known as such, and this is a beat you can't touch. I told you, homeboy, you can't touch this. Yeah, that's how we living, and you know you can't touch this. Look in my eyes, man, you can't touch this. Yo, let me bust the funky lyrics. Fresh new kicks and bands, you got it like that. Now you know you wanna dance, so move out of your seat and get a fire girl and catch this beat while it's rolling. Hold on, pump a little bit and let her know what's going on.
So you saw how actually social distancing should look like. There was also an interesting study, I think it was published last week, which says that, if you're driving a bicycle, it's not 2 meters, it's actually 10 meters. If you are jogging, it's many more meters than 2 meters. And you get constantly all these new scientific studies which will have deep effects on sociability, on the future of social bonds even, whether you feel safe on the street or you're a bit paranoid because someone was just jogging in front of you. These are all now becoming thoughts and emotions which most of us feel. But what this short Toronto video also showed is how social distancing, and that's why I think it's a mythology, is always connected to the class and to the class question. First of all, you can see it in cities, in the way urbanism is being shaped in different global cities, in the way that really as a pedestrian, you don't have much space to walk in most of the cities. Or you can see differences between cities. Some cities like Copenhagen or Berlin are rather bicycle friendly, while you have other cities like Belgrade, which are not really bicycle friendly. And if the European Commission and the European establishment was really interested into creating more healthy cities, they would invest precisely into that. And now with the global pandemics, we can see that actually we need some physical distance in cities, and that the cities shouldn't be owned by the cars, but they should be owned by the people. Besides cities, social distancing, besides not just cities, you know, the way you walk around the city, the way the future of places is being constructed. Besides that, coronavirus is also affecting many other spheres of human activity and even spirituality. So the following clip you will see, I'm warning you, this is not fake news, it's not a science fiction movie, this is reality from Croatia, I think a few weeks ago. Now, this is how blessing looks like in the world during coronavirus. Of course, this is not something special for Croatia. I could have shown you many more positive clips of solidarity from Croatia. For instance, at this very moment, people in Zagreb are not clapping in this kind of way. We are clapping now, you know, to all the heroes of society, but then again, we will vote for those who privatize the healthcare system. But at this very moment, people in Zagreb are actually on their balconies shouting, clapping, in order to protest against the corrupted mayor of Zagreb. So you don't have only these images like this now, and perhaps in one of the next episodes we can also show positive examples of subversion and how social distancing can be used also for, I would say, more positive human actions. Why this is interesting? This is interesting because it's not only happening in Croatia. You have seen how churches, priests reacted in the United States, in many other countries. You know, they were not willing to close the churches. They thought that God would protect their own stupidity. Well, he didn't, or she didn't. If I'm getting some questions already, but I'll come to it a bit later, and maybe when the surprise guest joins us. Before we go there, I also wanted to tackle another aspect of changes which this kind of perverted sociability actually produces. Like me, myself, I'm not really used to this screen. I do too many meetings already per Zoom and different platforms, unfortunately platforms. I know there are others as well. Too many meetings, too many screens already. And I was someone who was used to travel around Europe and the world and giving lectures in front of audiences from smaller ones to 1,000 people, speaking to other people in the same room, being able to shout, to smell the other people, to see the expression of the audience, which I cannot see now. So this social distancing will also have effects on this kind of sociability, on the public space. On the public space as a human activity which forms a society. You know, what is happening today is that the famous slogan of Margaret Thatcher is coming true, that there is no such thing as society, only individuals and families. And of course, what you have on the other side, there is the state, which is now serving also big companies and bailing out the airlines and the banks and so on. And then you have these atomized individuals in quarantine, self-isolation, which are not really a society. Because in order to have a society, and we don't have it at this moment, I think, I know it's a radical thesis, but I don't think we have it. In order to have a society, you need to have cafes. For instance, the role of cafes was really important for the beginning of the French Revolution. Richard Sennett was writing about it, and we spoke recently a bit about it on this program, but also public theaters, sports. So social distancing will have a big effect also on all these activities. So let us show and remind ourselves of a time when lecture halls, this kind of communication we now have, were full of people, and what can happen if something unplanned happens in this kind of space. So let's watch the next video and we are back shortly.
Si vous vous êtes là, comme ça, exprimé, hein, devant ce public, qui en effet est tout prêt à entendre, n'est-ce pas, ces déclarations insurrectionnelles. Mais qu'est-ce que vous voulez faire?
Où je veux en venir?
Oui, voilà.
Oui. C'est la question, au fond, que les parents, les curés, les idéologues, les bureaucrates et les flics posent régulièrement aux gens comme moi, hein, qui se multiplient, quoi. Hein.
Oui.
Je peux vous répondre, je veux faire une chose, c'est la révolution.
Oui.
Vous voyez? Il est clair que au moment où nous en sommes pour le moment, une de nos cibles préférées seront ces moments précis où des gens comme vous sont en train de venir, au fond, apporter à tous ces gens qui sont là la justification de leur misère quotidienne, au fond, hein. C'est ça que vous faites, vous, hein?
Ah, pas du tout.
Oui.
Il veut me lancer de la merde à la gueule, il le fait. Je n'ai pas besoin de flic pour me défendre.
Que ça change pour une nouvelle organisation. Cette organisation, c'est pas du tout exclu. C'est pas du tout exclu que on la voit naître. Ah, on la voit sous forme de régime qui s'intitule eux-mêmes, mon Dieu, pour ce qui est leur aspiration en effet suprême, n'est-ce pas? C'est la totalité, enfin, c'est comme il vous disait à l'instant, enfin, n'est-ce pas, qu'on y soit tous. Qu'on se serre encore un petit peu plus les coudes, enfin, pour être ceux qui veulent quoi, enfin. Organisation, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire si ce n'est pas un nouvel ordre?
That was a part of a video of a lecture of the French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, which he held at a Catholic university in Belgium in 1972. And what you can see here is how his lecture is interrupted by a young situationist, a follower of Guy Debord and the other situationists, who basically thought of Lacan as, I would say, as an example of what Lacan himself calls the discourse of the master. Although you have a nice twist in which way, after he was, after the water and the incident, Lacan goes back and basically gives a lesson to the young revolutionary, which is similar to a lesson Lacan gave in 1968, saying that what the revolutionaries actually aspire is a new master, and they will get a new master. This is what Lacan claimed already before 72. And we are again in a similar situation today. A new order is being born, and precisely the four discourses which Lacan was exploring in his work are becoming important again. The discourse of the analyst, the discourse of the hysteric, the discourse of the university, and the discourse of the master. What you could have seen in this short clip is, the obvious one is, of course, the discourse of the university. Namely, this is a discourse which legitimizes the master signifier and produces and reproduces knowledge, which is very often based on dogmas, or it is very often connected to the subject supposed to know. And you can also see the discourse of the master, namely the discourse where the master signifier, in this case actually that's Lacan, the master signifier is being constructed and formulated by the master, by the agent. But the master signifier, and that's the importance, I would say, of Lacanian psychoanalysis in connection to semiotics, is that the master signifier today could be produced and formulated and is produced and is being imposed by global capitalism, or actually a new sort of global capitalism, which is authoritarian capitalism, which is coming much closer to Alphaville. So what the master discourse is doing today is not only occupying spaces by erecting borders, by imposing control in cities, surveillance, how we will behave, whether we will be tracked by an app or so on. The master discourse is also occupying our minds, our brains, our screens. The master discourse, in that sense, is imposing something onto us and turning us into objects. And what capitalism in this framework of four discourses could be called a mutation of the master discourse, but we cannot go much deeper into that. I suggest we return to Lacan in some future episodes, but what is important to say in this context is that again, to remind ourselves that when we hear a term such as social distancing, self-isolation, back to normality, new normal, and other mythologies, we should always think of the master discourse and who is the one who is imposing the meaning of these terms. For instance, not so many people, on the left, of course, and some theoreticians, but in public imagination, social distancing is not directly connected to class. Of course, for those who don't have the luck to be in self-isolation or to be distancing themselves, they know very well it's connected to class. For instance, some of my friends from New York tell me that when it started to spread there, and when everyone saw how Donald Trump was reacting, the rich class and the higher middle class immediately left their apartments in New York and went to the outskirts of the city into their private houses. At the same time, the middle classes were constrained back to their houses or apartments to a sort of 24/7 capitalism, 10 hours of their or our days or 12 hours online, and then the rest of the day taking care of children and phone calls and Zooms and so on. While at the same time, the lowest classes, the poor, millions of them either already lost their jobs or are going to work, even if that means a health risk or literally dying. Like a few days ago in Germany, a worker from Romania, a field worker, a seasonal worker, died so that the Germans and Austrians could have asparagus on their tables. You know, when you put the term social distancing into this context, you can see that it affects the class question directly. You know, Germany usually has around 300,000 seasonal workers per year in Germany, but now they're missing all these people because they went back to Romania, to Serbia, and other Eastern European countries. So how will those people social distance themselves? Well, in a similar universe like Alphaville, I claim. They will be segregated, they will be exploited, so that other people, the higher classes, could have asparagus on their table. But we will go too far. Before our surprise guest appears finally, to go deeper into this, let us just show a very short example how the future, since we mentioned asparagus, how the future of restaurants and the future of beaches might look like in the world of coronavirus. I warn you. So those were some images which were published in the Italian La Repubblica newspaper. And for someone who comes from the Mediterranean like me, who loves summer and who would rather now be on a beach, this looks like a very dystopian image, because you can imagine that that would really start happening. At the same time, this image as well, like all images, can also be read through the eyes of critique of ideology. Like as someone who comes from Croatia, I cannot really imagine that that might start happen on the Croatian beaches. Perhaps it will in some places, but the problem currently is actually that probably there will be no summer season, no beach. Why? Croatia depends, 20% of the GDP of Croatia is tourism. It depends on tourism, but now all the borders are closed. And the government is counting on the domestic population to go back to the beaches. Already until now, like 70% of the Croatians couldn't afford themselves to go to a beach in summer. So it's a question what will be. I think there will be no tourist season, although what's interesting is that the government is now negotiating with the Czechs to come back to Croatia, although in recent years they were loving the Germans, the Italians, and those with more money. But Czech Republic came up with a very interesting proposal to create a special air corridor between Czech Republic and Croatia, where the tested people could come to the sea in Croatia. And this brings us to a short clip from one of my favorite TV series, which is dealing with airplanes and flying, which will bring us directly into the future of airlines, but not only that, but how the class question was always very visible in airlines. So please meet Jerry and Elaine and the special guest.
I have one seat in first class and one in coach. The price is the same because your flight was canceled.
Oh, well, I'll take the first class.
Jerry?
What?
Why should you get the first class?
Elaine, have you ever flown first class?
No.
All right, then. See, you don't know what you're missing. I've flown first class, Elaine. I can't go back to coach. I can't. I won't.
You flew here, coach.
Yeah, that's the point.
All right, fine. I don't care. If the plane crashes, everybody in first class is going to die anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll live.
Wake up, you human slug. Wake up! Wake up! I can't hold it anymore. Excuse me, I've got to go to the bathroom. I've got to go to the bathroom. Sorry. Do you know that?
got water in your ear.
Can't get rid of it. Maybe a leak inside my brain.
Would you stop that? It's not safe to be jumping up and down on a plane.
I gotta get it out. I can't take this anymore.
Kramer, don't be fooling around up here! Kramer! Hey, get the hell out of here.
What is that?
Oh, my goodness.
What is that noise? What is that noise?
Kramer, what the hell did you do?
I lost my balance.
Oh my God! What's going on?
Kramer! It was an accident! I told you to stop what happened!
Oh my God! We're going down! We're gonna die!
Just when I was doing great! I found it! God wouldn't let me be successful!
Is this how it ends? It can't! It can't end like this!
Oh, I'm ready! I'm ready! Glory! Hallelujah!
Okay, now we are waiting the person who went to the toilet at the plane to come to the virus mythologies. Larry, it's great to see you, Larry.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, how about that?
Nice to see you again. It's been like 2 weeks, but I have a feeling it has been like a century or something since we spoke last time.
Are you still in the same place you were?
Yeah, same place, although my studio is on the other side.
I see.
But I just switched the studio, yeah.
How are you?
Are you at the same place?
I'm at the same place. I never leave my place. Even when I don't have to, even when I'm allowed to, I don't leave, so.
Let's start speaking immediately. You were the one who doesn't only appear in a cameo role at the plane, but you're also the one who actually imagined and came up with this. Seinfeld is usually happening in 1 or 2 apartments in a cafe, and then you have the airport and airlines. So could you, from the experience of Seinfeld, tell us what do you think, what kind of effects will coronavirus have on the psychology of people, on taking planes, on the air industry? Are you a bit nostalgic when you see this kind of images when people were still flying, and what the future will look like? I'm losing him. I'm losing him a bit. I don't know whether you are as well losing him in the audience.
These shows will serve as a guide to a future pandemic somehow, Are you there?
I lost you for a second. You were frozen.
Okay, yeah. I was just saying simply that, what happens when I put, oh, look at that. See, that's cool. I just did the gallery view. I was saying that we never imagined sitting around at the Seinfeld office in the early 90s that we would say, oh, these episodes will serve as some sort of guide to behavior during the pandemic. But they've turned out to be somewhat prophetic, I guess.
Yeah, I keep losing you a bit, but I think I can hear your voice, but I think it's fine.
Okay.
Maybe
okay, yeah.
So how did you, I mean, what is interesting for me in Seinfeld is how it all starts with the first class, second class, and then Elaine is stuck in the coach. But in the end, in the ending episode, they all come back to the first class, and then we see what happens, they all fall down.
Exactly. Yes. No, in the end, comedy has to be anti-classist to be funny. Although again, those definitions are constantly changing also. People are pushing all these definitions and these boundaries. But to me, it's not really funny to be laughing with the power structure. It's funny to be laughing when you're attacking it.
Mm-hmm. Shall we see another clip from another Larry who also was stuck in a coach, and then we comment on it and come back? Yeah?
Sure.
Okay, let's just wait. Yeah, it's coming.
Okay.
Sir, I'm sorry. This is for first class passengers.
I know, but
Your ticket is for 11C, sir.
I know, but nobody's sitting there. You give me like a personal upgrade, and I can upgrade you, and.
Sir.
No, okay.
Sir, can I ask you a really big favor? I have a medical condition where I have to. My bladder's really overactive. I have a bladder condition. I have to get up a lot. Is there any way I could sit in the aisle and you would want to switch to the middle?
Well, I can't switch seats with you. I mean, I can't sit in the middle. It's claustrophobic in there.
It's okay. I just have to ask because I'm up so often.
I'll die in the middle.
It's so painful, too. I just want to see where the bathrooms are so I know, because it's going to be a problem.
Okay, fine.
Really? You were such a gentleman. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, my lucky day.
Yeah, mine too.
Just switch looking for the little bit.
Gotta buckle up. Jesus Christ. Give it here. Can I grab one of your cleaners? I think it's just allergy.
Oh, man. No.
Sir, if I could just have you open your eyes so I can see your pupils. If you could just try and relax a little bit. Long, deep breaths.
Excuse me, everyone. One of our passengers is taken ill. If there's a doctor on board, can you please ring your call button?
Now, sir, are you currently taking any medication?
Asking for a doctor. Huh? You're not going to heed the call?
Give it a minute. He's going to be fine.
How do you know? You don't even know what he has.
You ever been part of an emergency landing? Is that what you want, Larry? To spend the night in Lubbock, Texas at a Days Inn with a $15 voucher from Cinnabon? Think about it.
Excuse me. I'd like to use the bathroom.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Don't move too much. Don't get up. Ow. Ah! Why don't you move your foot, for God's sake?
So glad I ran into you on this flight. I'll call up Marty or set up a game.
Yeah, we'll play. Oh, you got up. By the way, that's the first time that you got up the entire trip. That was a total bullshit story about your bladder.
A medical condition.
You got a medical condition. She's got a medical condition. One day you're gonna really have to go to the bathroom and nobody's gonna let you. I had to sit in the middle of the entire trip because of you.
Okay, we are back.
Oh, hi. That was more than a clip. That was most of the episode, I think, actually.
Yeah, I can even hear, but I'm not sure. David is telling me that they maybe closed the stream. It might be copyright issues, but let me check out, because here I can still see it's live on YouTube, but David says me, let's wait a second. It's almost the whole episode. I'm sorry. I didn't know that we would have problems with it.
I think one of the things that's clear in both the Seinfeld episodes and the Curb episodes, and something that's very true about Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, is they are not tactile people. You know, they've never been people who like hugging or shaking hands or kissing or any kind of casual intimacy like that. They have always been slightly neurotic about it, slightly germophobic, maybe prophetically so, as it turns out.
You've been flying a lot also for your Netflix TV series, and you obviously have also a lot of personal experience with flying. What do you think, how will the future of the air business look like after this crisis?
I'm very curious about that, actually. I mean, having flown for the Netflix series, I had the entire array of flight experiences, from major airlines and business class to puddle jumpers from Ghana to Somalia. Some that didn't seem like they knew where they were going. We missed airports. We almost flew into the ocean at one point. So the future, it's essential, obviously, that we get around. We set up the world this way, but and the airlines are not a profitable industry. So they constantly need propping up. Every time there's any kind of, problem in the society, the airlines seem to need the bailout every single time. So I wish if we had a more progressive government that we would examine how airlines work, how consumers are serviced by airlines, which is horribly. And that when the airlines start to run again, it's going to be chaos, because it's always been chaos. And it's always been overpriced, uncomfortable, abuse of passengers. The consumer has no say. It's a very monopolized, corporation that is actually a beneficiary of capitalist socialism,
Yeah, what I find also interesting, and you can see it both in Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm, is also the semiotic perspective. If you look at airports or planes, you always have semiotics and also psychoanalysis involved already. It is full of signs which tell you where you have to go, which tell you what kind of class are you, whether you are the first class and you can go to some space.
Yeah, no, I've lost you.
I mean, it's really, you can see how ideology and class is reflected on airplanes and airports as well. I think I lost you for a moment again, but now you're back.
Yes.
Yeah.
I lost you. Yes. I think I heard the beginning of what you said about the semiotics of airline travel. It's very true. I mean, there's nothing like the confusion that you feel in airports that you're not familiar with when you look at the signs that are intended to clarify things for you. They wind up, at least for me, they create a lot of anxiety because they're giving you too many choices, especially in foreign languages. And it's a very disorienting, alienating experience to walk through airports. That's why for me, sometimes getting on the plane is the relief. I'm finally on the plane. I made it through the experience of the airport, which I think, again, thinking about LAX or any busy airport in the future, I don't know how they're going to handle the people checking their bags, the people showing up, the people leaving, the people getting their bags, the boarding, how I don't know how any of that's going to work. But I wish that they would re-examine the entire, take the opportunity, to re-examine the entire industry and see how it really should work. Because right now it doesn't work, and it's certainly not going to work when it comes back at some time in the future.
Yeah,
it's never worked,
Yeah, it never worked. And I mean, if 9/11 was a lesson of anything, it is how also the airline business changed. After that, we had to go through all these controls, surveillance, even biopolitical control, biometrics, now facial recognition. And I think after coronavirus already now, you will on the one hand have a situation which will be even more controlled than after 9/11. And on the other hand, I think we will go back to what both Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm showed. That it will again be a class question. I like to put it like this, that most of the regular airplanes now are down, at least in Europe. I don't know about the States.
True.
But here, most of the domestic travel, international travel, the passenger travel is down. But what you had 1 or 2 weeks ago, you still had chartered flights from Eastern Europe, driving, transporting the seasonal workers, the working class.
Yes.
And I think, in the future, you will have, again, the first ones who will be able to travel are either the working class to become exploited, or the rich who will travel in first class.
You're suggesting a modern version of the slave ship, essentially. That will be what the transportation is used for.
Yeah, with the big planes, you actually have 2 levels already.
Yeah, yes, very true. Very true. So I agree with that. I agree that that's the look, all the headlines here in America today are not about the staggering rising death toll. It's about reopening the economy. And we now have protests in front of a number of Democratic state capitals of pro-Trump supporters who are gathering in large groups in defiance of all the restrictions. So you have a kind of a very disorderly, chaotic potentially violent. A lot of these groups are carrying their arms with them to the protest. I mean, where does all that lead? I mean, and then you have Trump today, by the way, tweeting, liberate Virginia, liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan. I mean, he's basically, as the president of the United States, calling for a civil war. So, you know, we have maybe larger problems in the airports right now. You know, it's not gonna, if people are demanding, if a certain segment of the population is demanding that they be free, however they see that, however they perceive that, it's going to cause conflict, and it is causing conflict.
Yeah, if there was a show of Seinfeld which anticipated this kind of conflict, which is also connected to a mythology of the coronavirus era, it is the one with Spare a Square. So I suggest we showed it. It's very short. I hope YouTube will not kick us out of the live. And if they kick us out,
I get more. It's okay. I get a residual either way, I think. So I'm good.
I hope we should. Yeah, it's coming.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. This is kind of embarrassing, but there's no toilet paper over here. Are you talking to me? Yeah, I just forgot to check. So if you could spare some. No, I'm sorry. What? No, I'm sorry, I can't spare it. You can't spare it? No, there's not enough to spare. Well, I don't need much. Just 3 squares will do it. I'm sorry, I don't have 3 squares now, if you don't mind. 3 squares? You can't spare 3 squares? No, I don't have a square to spare. I can't spare a square. Well, is it 2 ply? Because if it's 2 ply, I'll take 1 ply. 1 ply. 1 puny little ply. I'll take 1 measly ply. Look, I don't have a square and I don't have a ply. No, don't pull. I beg you. I sell paper goods, you jerk.
Paper goods?
Excuse me, do you have a tissue? No, I'm sorry, I can't spare it. There's just not enough to spare. Where's the ladies' room?
Yeah.
I have to go to the bathroom, too. Oh, damn. Something wrong? Yeah, there's no toilet paper in here. I usually check, but would you mind?
I can't. I don't have it. I don't have a square to spare. I can't spare a square.
Hey, wait a minute. I know you.
That's right, honey. And I know you.
Go! Here, take it.
Thanks.
And we're back. They didn't. YouTube didn't kick us out this time. We are still live.
Good.
That's
you
good.
know what I was thinking about as I was watching it, not to interrupt, but I was thinking how what that illustrates in a weird way is how false these shortages are. That they're food shortages, paper goods shortages. That's kind of like always manipulated by the market and the manufacturers, and we're led to believe, oh, there's not enough toilet paper, there's not enough this, there's not enough that, when all of that stuff really is available and it just is not distributed properly. It's like when they talked about starvation in Africa and there would be food there, but the corruption between the food manufacturers and the food distributors ensured that there would always be scarcities that keep the price up. And so in a weird way, that is kind of a personification of that issue. Not being able to be generous enough to spare a square, but also falsely believing that there is no more toilet paper.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. If you think that there will be no toilet paper, in the end, there won't be toilet paper because everyone will start to behave in the same way.
And of course, America, you know, in America, we are so spoiled. Paper is in abundance. Paper products are always in abundance. There, you know, paper towels, napkins, toilet papers, Kleenex, You know, it is expected that you have different paper products for each orifice, essentially. But if you know, in places like Uruguay, places that I've been to, you basically get a tissue and that's supposed to hold you the whole day. You know, they don't have an abundance of paper products. It's very precious in places like that because it's expensive.
Mm. Maybe I'd come back a bit to the term of social distancing, just to explore it a bit more.
Yes.
So, because I think, you know, Seinfeld and also Curb Your Enthusiasm was great in, I'll use the term deconstruction, not in the Derrida's way, but in deconstructing what lies beneath human habits, in the way we relate to other people. And it always shows Seinfeld, for instance, in so many episodes, how the characters of Seinfeld are already immersed in their class position, in their background, what kind of, you know, prejudices they have. And what I really loved is how Seinfeld and also Curb Your Enthusiasm showed how these little details in life actually form life. And so my question would be, how would you imagine Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm after coronavirus, you know? And maybe not just that, how would you personally, what do you think will change? You know, will we have cinemas where people will be like 2 meters away and sitting there? What kind of effects will this have on sociability, on society?
Well, I was thinking that Larry David is very well suited on Curb to almost devote a whole season, if he wanted to his personal adjustment to life after the coronavirus. Because in many, many ways, he would find it advantageous. He would exploit the social distancing and the restrictions. He would sneak into the grocery store early. He would, you know, he would use it somehow to his benefit, but in the end, it would explode on him, you know. And because he would find that some of the restrictions do not sit well with him, and he would resist, and that's where the conflict would arise. So I can see him, look, in real life, we're all going to deal with it. So certainly the way that he filters his real life through his comedy, it seems like a natural, you can almost imagine the episodes, you know, from him leaving the house the first day after you're allowed to leave the house, through a whole season of him trying to navigate his mundane life. You could see the struggles, the comic struggles that might ensue.
Yeah, unfortunately we didn't, and YouTube wouldn't give us pick up the scene, the famous scene from Curb where he appears at the doctor and then uses the telephone, which he wasn't supposed to post. That was before times of coronavirus. I think after coronavirus, you know, you will be unable to touch anything. It will be like Star Trek, you know, you come in.
He wouldn't touch it himself now, I'm sure. I'm sure that most of the things that he will touch in the outside world now will be done with his hand covered with a Kleenex or something.
Yeah. There is
by the way, I should just say, sorry to interrupt. I don't think I personally have touched Larry David in 30 years, just so you know. When we greet, we just nod heads, you know. When we depart, we nod heads, we say goodbye, but there's no touching involved. In fact, the first jacket that we made for Seinfeld had a patch on it that said, "No hugging, no learning." That's what it said. Seinfeld, no hugging, no learning. That's the lesson that we were trying to impart.
Well, that's visible in many of the episodes. So I'm glad for you. You won't have any problems in the future. Your life will stay the same. No hugging, no touching, joking.
Exactly.
Yeah. But there is also another moment which Seinfeld anticipated. Kramer, if you want, a character you were involved in, which is the famous reconstruction of the JFK, the spitting scene. Because now, I've read 2 days ago in India, under the Disaster Act or something like that, there is a new law which prohibits spitting on the floor, and you can even end up in prison. So there is this famous, I suggest we watch it and then we comment it, the famous scene from Seinfeld with...
Sure.
I hope they won't cut us, let's see. But we will record and we will reappear, don't worry.
I'm just sitting here, I'm good.
I hate Keith Hernandez. Hate him.
I despise him. Why? I'll tell you why.
Now, let me tell it.
No, you can't tell it.
You always tell it.
All right, tell it.
You just tell it.
June 14th, 1987. Mets, Phillies were enjoying a beautiful afternoon in the right field stands when a crucial Hernandez error opens the door to a 5-run Phillies ninth, cost the Mets the game.
Our day was ruined. There was a lot of people, they're waiting by the players' parking lot. Now, we're coming down the ramp. Newman was in front of me. Hernandez was coming toward us. As he passes us, Newman turns and says, "Nice game, pretty boy." Hernandez continued past us up the ramp.
Then, a second later, something happened that changed us in a very deep and profound way from that day forward.
What was it?
He spit on us. And I screamed out, "I'm hit!"
Then I turned and the spit ricocheted off him and it hit me.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the immutable laws of physics contradict the whole premise of your account. Allow me to reconstruct this, if I may, for Miss Bennis, as I've heard this story a number of times. Newman, Kramer, if you'll indulge me. According to your story, Hernandez passes you and starts walking up the ramp.
Mm-hmm.
Then you say you were struck on the right temple. The spit then proceeds to ricochet off the temple, striking Newman between the third and the...
Okay, we are back.
Hi. That's pretty funny. I haven't seen that probably since it was on. Like a lot of these clips, I don't usually watch things after I'm done with them, and that was actually very funny.
No, and unfortunately we didn't show the whole one, so I invite everyone to watch it, because Jerry's reconstruction is also very interesting.
Very, very funny. Yeah.
If you look at, sorry.
I was just saying, I think it's a 2-part episode actually. Also, very epic episode.
Yeah, I find Newman a character I always loved in a very perverted way. I find what he says in the clip is also very prophetic. He says something changed in a very profound way. As if he was talking about coronavirus in a way.
Yeah. It's funny, when we were kids in New York, on the subway, there would be signs. We were talking about semiotics before, mm-hmm. and sometimes the signs would be in Spanish. And it would say, no spitting in Spanish. And for years, nobody told me what it meant. I couldn't figure out what it meant, but it was no spitting. And so spitting was considered to be very rude, even on the subway. Even spitting onto the tracks was, punishable by a fine, and now I think that those signs are gone. I don't know, now they'll have to put them back up, because spitting has now become dangerous, actually.
Yeah,
not just disgusting, but dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we started. I don't know whether you watched with Godard's Alphaville.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, this movie where actually all these kind of activities are forbidden, because I think, I'm not in favor of spitting on the street, but to put it like that, touch, hugging someone, coming close, even spitting. It's a very spontaneous human thing, I would say, to do. Yeah. While it is, you learn not to spit on the floor is also what Pierre Bourdieu called a class distinction. It's a distinction, yes. You learn it in a way. But if you completely prohibit it, I think we might come into a universe like, Alphaville, where even love, emotions, everything is prohibited. That's the problem. And if you spit on the street, like in China, you will have a social credit. And then you will not be able to enter a restaurant because you were the one who spitted. This kind of things might start happening.
Well, also, if you look at the clip that we just showed, the spitting is used as almost like a weapon. It's an aggressive spit. And again, growing up in Brooklyn, growing up in New York like Jerry and Larry did, and knowing even politically around the world, when people don't have weapons, they often spit. That's sometimes all they have. They spit on people. And now maybe that spit becomes a more lethal weapon too.
Yeah, that's not good news. I mean, unlike Netherlands, where everyone was waiting to buy weed, we saw the images from the United States. You know, if it was weed, it would be much better than buying arms.
Yes, I think the law in Netherlands forces everybody to have their saliva glands removed, so they actually can't spit.
Larry, we are getting some questions, I think, from the people who were here before. I don't know whether anyone is here. We are still live. We are not removed yet. I will talk to YouTube later to publish all Seinfeld episodes for free. So the question is...
I have no control over that, by the way. Just so you know.
We'll shoot something new. I don't know.
Yeah. We'll do it with puppets.
What?
We'll do it with puppets.
Or Muppets. Puppets. We will be the Muppets, the puppets.
Okay.
So the question is from before, is the symbolic structure of capitalism or its response to COVID-19 an attempt to keep us in a certain reality interpretation, and should we then make a counter-symbolic reality? What do you think about it?
I totally agree with the premise of the first part of the question. I think the problem is, and I was just talking about this with my wife this morning, you see how the media becomes a willing propaganda arm of the government. In America right now, as I said before, all the stories, all the news is ignoring the horror, the suffering, the escalation, the death, and focusing on, we could reopen the economy. We could have people come to restaurants again. We're ready to do that. Let's do it. And rather than having this counterpoint of view, which of course we both know exists, it doesn't get the same attention as the mainstream media is able to give to the official propaganda noise coming from the government. They become a willing accomplice, really. So it's very hard to counter that. You know, you and I, we all raise our voices, but it's very hard to counter that sort of power of the media.
Yeah, I also agree with you, and I agree with the question. And I must say that what I think we should be doing is thinking in the direction how we can counteract it. I mean, that's why for these special episodes, I've chosen the perspective of semiotics, which is not just semiotics, it's not just science, it's language.
Yes.
I mean, even, if there is a, comedy, at least how I see it, has a lot to do with language. And, and it always had, even if you change a word, it can become comic. And it is a sort of subversion, not just language, but of expectation, And I think what you said, now we are moving into a universe which is, I think at the beginning there was a shock, even for the elites. They didn't really know what to do. They were laughing at it, at the virus and so on. But now slowly and slowly you can see it in the United States, in UK, how you have this manufacturing of consent. Now everything is blamed on China. As you said, we will slowly reopen the economy. It's not our fault, it's the enemy, the virus. So you have a kind of hegemonic discourse happening, which is imposing on us a certain interpretation of this crisis. And I think what we have to do is not just, to counteract it directly, because as you said, we don't have the same, I mean, you've been on a Netflix, of course, millions of people watched it, but you don't have a television network every day, and you don't have a press conference every day, because those guys who are in power now, the opposition is in quarantine, and those in power have a press conference every day. So I think what we could do, I finish here, this is also trying to answer to the question.
Yes.
I think what we could do, and that's why I'm so glad you're here tonight, is that by comedy, by poetry, Alphaville, the movie by Godard, it was influenced by Roland Barthes, actually. Even Godard invited Roland Barthes to come to the movie and to play the professor von Braun. Why? Because in Mythologies, I think that's the reason, I don't know, we should ask Godard. I think the reason is because in the Mythologies, Barthes says that the way to counteract this kind of hegemonic ideological discourse, he investigates on the one hand mathematics and on the other hand poetry. And then he says mathematics can very soon become prey to the mythology, because all these equations and everything symbolize a kind of rationality, and the mathematics really becomes a kind of a god in our
Yes.
era, you know, with computers and so on. But then he says poetry is different, because what poetry does, it plays with the language, it subverts language, and I think comedy has a similar role. You know, what do you think about that? Do you agree?
Well,
with
I think comedy is very much about language and mathematics. They're both kind of abstract concepts that sort of address different parts of the brain. You know, when you start to deconstruct words, sentences, expectations, that's where comedy lives, really, in upsetting expectations, surprise, unpredictability, and mathematics as well is a kind of a structure for that, in a sense. You know, mathematics provides a structure. In comedy, especially in Seinfeld and Curb, you see structure. You see equations being played out through the characters and through the plot. And so it becomes kind of a fun game at that time. There wasn't as much on the line, obviously. It wasn't as urgent. So we were able to really step back and experiment a little bit more with those ideas and see where it took us, you know, not knowing that there would be a result that would work or be satisfying.
Here comes an interesting question, which I don't know how I forgot to ask. Since you're you were the best friend of Kramer. You were the one who created many of some of my most favorite episodes. And the question by someone is, by the audience, what is Kramer's favorite philosopher?
Oh, well, Kramer, I would say Kramer's favorite philosopher would probably be someone like, and I can't even pronounce his name, but someone like Gramsci, the Italian anarchist philosopher. You know, I think he's into anarchy. You know, I think that he would see himself benefiting from the coming anarchy, and I could assure you he was prepared for the pandemic, and he has a way to exploit it as well.
Yeah, we even saw, I mean, he was also panic buying a lot of stuff, and I mean, Kramer would be, probably he would be the only one to survive among all of them. I don't know.
That's right. It's true, because he already has adapted to the post-pandemic environment. He lives as if he is in a post-pandemic.
Maybe he is the pandemic.
Yes, well, that's possible.
Kramer as the virus of anarchism.
He is. He's the language virus, that's for sure.
Thanks for mentioning that. And I mean, that's Burroughs, right?
Yes.
William Burroughs and Laurie Anderson. There is a question, and maybe by that we slowly come to an end, although it's not the end. We will continue. Question for Larry Charles, by the audience. The virus brings fear of survival, of contagion, of the other. How does humor adapt to this? And are representations of social identities like neighbors bound to change?
I think humor at its best, and I think this is what my Netflix show is really about, humor at its best melts away all the distinctions. It melts away all the barriers and all the boundaries. When humor is working, everyone connects to it. And you suddenly have a community that forms very organically around humor when it works. And that's why certain comedians have universal appeal, because they are resonating with all kinds of people from all different walks of life in all different situations, and they're able to connect. So humor is that connective tool that very few other forces in life really provide.
Mm-hmm. There is another question. So just a second, and maybe, yeah. What do you think about the strict but at the same time vague rules that we have to follow, and how the people are looking at everyone's else behavior?
You mean like narking on people sort of stuff?
I don't know, I didn't pose the question, but I guess in the sense, I mean, if I may interpret the question.
Yes.
I also see it on the streets here in Vienna, you know, at the beginning, you know, when you would see someone with a face mask, you would become, you know, kind of thinking, oh, this is too paranoid. Why is that person having a face mask? And when someone doesn't have a face mask, you become like the soup Nazi.
Yes.
You know, you need a face mask. You cannot do without it. Maybe in this sense, you know, how it really affects humans' behavior. and how they think of the others and the neighbor, not just the neighbor as someone living in the same building, but maybe in the religious meaning of a neighbor, someone who is a neighbor.
Well, you know, in America, the mask is a very negative stereotype. You know, covering your face has very negative stereotypes that are very deeply ingrained in the society. So people are suspicious of masks, and they often have good reason to be. So now, when it's become a reason to protect your health, we have to adjust not just to wearing them, but to how we feel about them. And I think that, again, almost going back to the last question, when you tap into the fear and the anxiety and the potential for death, and then you add to it a scary symbol like the mask, it sends a lot of mixed signals. And I think people are still processing all those mixed signals.
Yeah,
we're still in the middle of it, you know?
Yeah, at the light at the middle of the tunnel.
That's right.
We called it in one of the previous episodes.
Yes, yes, and it's still very apt. You know, people want to figure it all out, but you can't figure it out while you're in the middle of it. It's still going on, and how it will play itself out, it's silly to you know, it's fun in a weird way to speculate and try to predict, but we both know that it'll take a turn that no one will expect, and we'll continue to do that. So I'm very curious. And trying to observe and trying to stay away from those social situations as much as possible where people will be judging one person or the other. There's a lot of danger to that, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think now we should end soon because it's like late for you. It's afternoon, right?
Yeah, a very gray afternoon here.
Really? I mean, it's a very dark night in Vienna as well, but it was a nice day. I mean, now when spring is coming, it becomes also very weird in this situation of confinement, I would say, because you want to go out. But I mean, here now, to be honest, I mean, it's much better than in the United States. Like now, small shops are open again. They are reopening stuff.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and
do you feel comfortable with that?
Yes and no. I mean, I cannot move from here. That's the problem. But I don't go out so much, to be honest. But what I see when I go out is how, you know, there is a sort of new normal. It's becoming normalized. And, you know, as you said, people are even learning how to speak with a face mask on.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's very weird because, for instance, if you put glasses and you have a face mask, then there is no facial expression at all.
Right.
You're just like a robot. And I think people will have to, you know, now you come, you know, usually in German or Austrian supermarkets, you would get in and you always have a voice telling you something, a voiceover in the supermarket. Now when I come in, that's something new. They say, ja, aber respektieren Sie das 2-Meter-Gesetz, something like that. You know, you have to respect the 2-meter rule. So now you can see this is all already becoming part of our social structures.
Yes.
Of normality.
Some people will completely adhere to it. You know, it'll break down along the same distinctions as every other big decision affects the society. Some people will immediately get in line. Some people will defy authority, and some people will not know what to do. They'll be very paralyzed by the new reality.
Yeah, I would choose to be with Kramer or with you in that kind of situation. Because I know
I'll see you in the bunker.
Yeah, see you, Larry, in the bunker. Thanks a lot for joining again, and we speak very soon. Thanks a lot, my friend.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.